Resuming debate, the honourable member Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, privacy is important, and on this, I think nearly all Canadians agree. I presume that all members of this House agree as well. A generation ago, the Supreme Court also agreed. It said that privacy was something upon which our most basic and ancient expectations of liberty depend. The security of the person depends on privacy, and without a basic expectation of privacy, it's difficult to imagine how any freedoms and security can exist. So, what about privacy in the digital age? There's a growing awareness of how both businesses and governments threaten people's privacy and their expectation of privacy. Over the last few years, Canadians have seen high-profile examples of gross violations of this basic expectation of privacy, both from the private sector and also by government. Users of the Tim Hortons app were rightly appalled when they learned that a private business was tracking their movements well after they had ordered and purchased their products without their knowledge or consent. We heard about Home Depot and the sharing of emails without the knowledge or consent of their customers. We've seen here where TELUS Mobility gave the Public Health Agency the mobility data of not only their own customers, but any customers whose signals pass through their infrastructure without following the requirements of Canada's existing privacy laws, which required the Public Health Agency to consult with the Privacy Commissioner before using the data and obtaining that data. We've seen a private corporation, Clearview Artificial Intelligence, Clearview AI, who had a business or have a business where they scrape billions of images of people's faces from across the internet. They identify these images however they can from whatever sources of public or whatnot that they have, and then sell these identified images to law enforcement agencies without the consent of the people whose faces and identities they sell. So these are examples of how both public and private institutions flout existing laws. And we've seen how on the public side, how the Privacy Commissioner has been ignored. When knowledge of PHAC's use of or actually when both PHAC and the RCMP, when knowledge of what they had done became available, it was clear that they had not followed the existing laws and consulted with the Privacy Commissioner. The RCMP, in fact, even disputed the findings of the Privacy Commissioner. They treated the Privacy Commissioner's findings that they had violated the Act. They considered that finding like it was some kind of matter of opinion with which they could disagree, and even repeated that refusal to accept the findings of the Privacy Commissioner at a parliamentary committee. So we've got a real problem with both businesses and with the government, who don't take their obligations to Canadians' privacy seriously enough. The RCMP also used sophisticated spyware to hack cell phones, again, without consulting the Privacy Commissioner about the use of new technology and new investigative tools, which was required under existing law. So this government has a problem when it, with respecting Canadians' privacy, and it's got a credibility problem around privacy-related issues, Madam Speaker. So in addition to these well-known breaches by law enforcement and law enforcement's casual attitude towards compliance with privacy law, the commercial incentives for business to use new technologies like facial recognition with artificial intelligence, there are enormous commercial incentives for businesses. And these concerns we've studied them at parliamentary committees, and we've heard experts testify about the dangers to Canadians by the potential misuse of artificial intelligence, both by businesses and by law enforcement. I mean, what happens when artificial intelligence goes wrong? I mean, facial recognition technology has built-in biases We've heard expert testimony about how the efficacy of facial recognition under existing software is best with sort of middle-aged white male faces, that when an individual is a child or a senior or a woman or a person with a darker skin tone, that these applications are far less likely to correctly match people. And that has life-changing consequences when we're talking about law enforcement, Madam Speaker. Never mind all of the commercial applications potentially with AI, with retail and other potential users. So all of these, in facial recognition, the images are often scraped from the internet without the consent of the borrower, or of the consent of the consumer. But consent is obviously something, and a system of consent is completely broken with privacy, and this needs to be updated. And I know that this bill tries to address this, but we know how anybody that has a device, we all have these devices that are connected to the internet, and I think everybody in this chamber and most Canadians have had the experience of trying to obtain access to a new application or using a new device, and you are confronted with an incomprehensible set of policies and disclosures with an agree button at the bottom. So even people that actually would undertake the painstaking process of reading through one of these enormous statements will generally get to the bottom and conclude they don't really understand what they're getting into, but they need to proceed with whatever task is at hand, and they click agree. That's a very small number of people. Most people just clear to the bottom, get to the bottom, and hit the agree button. And nobody has any idea what they've agreed to. And I think a lot of Canadians are sadly resigned to the belief that they know that when they click agree, they are giving up a part of their privacy. They don't really know what they're giving up. They know that they've given up something, but they just sort of shrug their shoulders and think there's just no way around it. There's no other alternative other than to hit the agree button. So I think there's no doubt that the consent model is thoroughly broken. And there's no doubt of the need to modernize Canada's privacy law. So does this bill cut it? Well, I would say no, Madam Speaker. This bill is too vague, it has too few details, and leaves too many unanswered questions to warrant support even as far as a committee study. This bill is a missed opportunity to get something right that has long been wrong. The failures of the existing privacy laws have been known for a very long time. This government's had a long time to get it right, and they have not done so. What we're debating is a bill that is consistently vague and has too many questions about it, what it does and what it fails to do. And furthermore, the concern is that if this bill passes, the number of these questions that will simply be settled by the minister and the department's bureaucrats rather than through parliamentary oversight. So this bill still doesn't definitively answer questions about when and how consent for the use of personal information is collected. It talks about the need for plain language, which, yes, of course, I agree with that, but it offers significant exceptions and no details. The bill doesn't clearly define a series of new terms, including sensitive information, as being distinct from other types of information. So while this bill, will this bill be compatible with the European Union's GDPR? There's a worldwide consensus that the GDPR is, some call it the gold standard. I don't know if it's really golden or not, but there is a consensus that it's sort of the best balance out there between balancing commercial expediency and consumer privacy. But we don't know if this bill is even going to meet up with. And how much time are we?
25 seconds.
Oh, I'm way behind then, Madam Speaker. I wanted to get into a number of shortcomings that this bill has, but if that's the case, I'm going to have to get that in questions. But I'm not going to support it. It's not strong enough to warrant approval even as far as a committee study, although I understand the need for a bill that will address privacy, and with that I'll let the questions follow.
Questions and comments? General Parliamentary Secretary of the Government, House Leader.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, 20 years later, after the need to see changes, Bill C-27 is here. And, you know, the last time we saw changes, Facebook didn't exist, iPhones didn't exist, and this is important legislation. Now, within the legislation, to use a couple of examples, there's a framework that allows for substantial fines. There's a framework that allows for protection of Canadian privacies. And what we're hearing from the Conservative Party, Madam Speaker, is that they don't want any of it because they're going to vote against the bill. They're ultimately arguing that this bill is not amendable, that they're going to vote against it. And my question to the member is, does he not see any value of the substance that's actually there to protect Canadians and empower things such as substantial fines?
The honourable member of Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, it's true that this bill contains the provision of substantial fines. Who is going to get fined in this bill? Who will it apply to? Will the tech giants with their armies of lobbyists and lawyers figure out the loopholes within all the ambiguity in this law? And will this be something that a small business owner who is not in the business of harvesting data but nevertheless must collect information to complete a transaction, will it just give a small business owner more red tape, more potential liability while letting off the tech giants? I don't know the answer to that question, and that should be clearer in this bill.
Séance est commentaire. L'honorable